Welcome back to Vegas October 1 Sounds, the Hunter Chronicles. In the fourth installment of this little mini-series on the lock interrogation report interpretation, we find ourselves here having already talked pretty extensively about cards and cards groups and using those card groups to access the rooms and when the cards were used, when was their first use, when was their first error. And we also talked about how on the 30th of September in the early mornings there was a segment of card access uses that was pretty irrational in nature. And all this is leading up in preparation for explaining the lock interrogation report events of September 30th between say 6 and 6:15 a.m. However, we're not quite to the point where we can lay out the whole picture in great detail without first introducing a few more items of information. So first, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to take you through a detailed sequence of how my Python program takes the lock interrogation report data and manipulates it to make a more user-friendly presentation Excel spreadsheet. And then I'm going to show you how I take the result of that program and annotate it to make it have some body and meaning to it. And then after we've done that stuff, I'm going to introduce some MGM video clips that are related to the early morning events. We have 4 clips there we can introduce. And I'll also be introducing a couple of charts that I have, and we'll be using these charts, and we'll be using the lock interrogation report, and we'll be using my notes in Obsidian, and we'll be using these Excel spreadsheets, and we'll be comparing and contrasting them to try to get indicate a good idea of what's going on. And in addition to that, of course, I'll be using my storyboard and other relevant data that I have. And all this is in preparation for the next and essentially the final video in this little mini-series on making a great detailed and graphic explanation of the lock interrogation report interpretation for these 15 minutes that we're talking about that just really stand out as something quite unusual. All right, so let's get with it. To the conversion of the data into the digital lock interrogation report. Now, there are several different people who have done something similar. Hunter did his own version. LVSA has his. Other people who have worked on this sort of stuff and produced their own independent studies. I'm pretty much relying upon my own stuff along with the commentary from Hunter that I've received over the months to generate these videos and these charts and everything. And I depend most heavily on the results of this Excel spreadsheet that I produced that I'll show you this evening. So let's go ahead and get started there. And as you can see here, I have my Obsidian notes up. I have, on this is just one example. I mean, you can arrange this thing any way you want it. On the right hand side, I've got my detailed timeline in text. Here I have an outline of a segment, and over here, I just wrote down some notes for this evening's video. But let's go ahead and get started by reviewing what I presented in the earlier portion of this video in the graphic form. All right. So we're going to talk about converting the digital spreadsheet form via a Python program into something that's a little bit more user-friendly. So we start out, and we have to recall that the FIT report contains 2 appendices, A and B. One is the lock interrogation printout for 134, and one is the lock interrogation printout for room 135. And this is an example of a segment for room 135, and as you can see, it's got a lot of detail in there, some of which can be shortened up and summarized in a much better fashion. So let's see, this is the time frame from now the original form is in backwards order as far as I'm concerned. It starts out with the most recent at the top and the oldest on the bottom, whereas my Excel spreadsheets do just the opposite. So we'll have something from 135, and then we'll have something from 134 of a similar fashion. In this case, I've selected a similar time frame. And as you can see, in this particular instance, room 134 had substantially fewer events, still the same format. And then I combine them and I sort them on the time, and I produce, one entire document. And then I start to do little manipulations on things. And the first thing I did was to color the days and times. So here we see the coloring of the times, so that every time there is a different time presented here in column F, it changes colors from either dark blue to light blue or light blue to dark blue. And this visually allows you to easily scan through and see the events that are all grouped at the same time. All right. You can also see here that, I've done some shortening in column G of the events. They used to be this long, verbose thing, and I've shortened them all down to my own mnemonics, but left pretty much everything else intact here. So for example, in columns H, I, and J, and K, we still have the entire information for the access control list authorities being used. So for example, on row 156 here, we see a guest card being presented to room 134, and it was accepted, and it is for Stephen Paddock, issued by J. Wheeler with this ID. All right. The next phase of the conversion process is to make lots of colorings and lots of things. But before we do the colorings, I add in the state information. Now the state information is you have to keep track of the door and the deadbolt. And I want to know when the door was open or closed and when the deadbolt was thrown or released. And that all comes down to a state. So the X and Y represent room 135. The Z and AA represent room 134. And, for room 135, the first column is the state of the deadbolt. For 134, column AA is the state of the deadbolt. So what I have is the door's closed status side by side here, and the deadbolts on the outside. So let's just pick one. Let's pick line 292. It's for room 134, and at that time, which is September 30th at 3:25 p.m., room 135 deadbolt is thrown, making the whole thing bolted closed. The door is closed. Room 134, the door is closed, but room 134 deadbolt is not thrown. And we need that information to make any rational and judicial interpretation of the lock interrogation report. Also, you notice here that in column B, the room has been colored such that 134 is a reddish, making it clearly distinct and separate from room 135. Also, the events, the shortened version of the events, have been color coded, with greenish colors being the times at which the door was opened via a card, and the yellowish being when they were opened from the inside. The blue is when a card was accepted, and the purplish have to do with the deadbolt, either the thrown or the release, and the reddish are errors. Open I here in column Y or column Z indicate that the door was open from the inside as opposed to be open from the outside. Similarly, the inside opens over here in column M in the event column are marked with a yellow. And that pretty much summarizes that sequence of what the Python program does up till this point. We'll also notice that over here in column J, I've taken all that information with the username, the room ID, and the issuing person and marked it into a unique grouping, and that those groupings for all guests and staff have been shortened down into little mnemonics. In this case, these refer to paddocks, 5A group cards, 5B, 4A, and 4B. All right, the next phase of the program is done manually. I mean, I have tons of different versions of these spreadsheets, but ultimately something what you just saw is now taken and I do a manual coloring process on it, much like what I did in earlier videos. So here we can see that I've taken all the card color groups for paddock and encoded a color onto them, much like what we've already discussed, with the red being the first card group that was issued, the green being for 135 anyway, the green being the next set of cards that were issued, and they were issued for room 134 corresponding to the check-in. The next group of cards that were issued is for room 134, 4B group, and that was I believe issued on the 30th. And then of course the last group, which would be the last group of card issued for 5B, also on the 30th. As you can see here, I've also marked some big gaps in time with green because the lock interrogation report itself doesn't give you any visual clue as to the time gap between events. And the more green there is, the larger the number of rows of green. So one row typically indicates about an hour's worth of time, and two indicates 2 or more hours. Oh, sorry. Let's get back to where I was. Well, ain't that just fun? Let's see here. We'll just let it run forward here while I talk about it a bit, because we want to get back to the annotated version. It takes a long time to do all these conversions, annotations, and everything. So you have to be aware that you have to pay very close attention to detail, because there's always room for a screw up. And I've looked at these things, probably 1,000 times by now. But that doesn't mean a second or third set of eyes wouldn't help. Now, also in these annotations here that I was talking about, in the first column A, there's this dark green color on particular rows, and those indicate times when the card was being accessed against the door lock, but the door was open. And that's what I call a test of the card. Someone goes over to the door, let's say they're on the inside of the room, they open the door, may or may not throw the deadbolt to hold it open, and then they take the card and they swipe it, and it either accepts it or rejects it or gives them an error beep. And that's what I call a test, to see if the card is working against that door lock, and those are marked with green. So by looking at column A and quickly just scanning down, you can see times at which he's testing the cards. Also, I add annotations here, these little arrows, be them green or blue, to indicate times when you're either entering or leaving the room with the green ones, or when you're making a transition through the adjoining doors as indicated with the blue arrows. Orange arrows and orange boxes indicate gaps in time or situations where I believe that paddock left the room and then came back at a later date. So in this particular case, with row 275 or 254 and 255, index 275 and 281, he left the room on the 30th at 2:43 p.m. and returned at 3:21 p.m. and in doing so he used card 4B, obviously for room 134, to gain entry. So it just, these orange thing just makes it quickly visible that he'd left the room and came back at a later time. We have these sort of half ellipse symbols here, and basically they're matching up the thrown and release pairs for the deadbolts for the rooms. And the thicker the line, the more protective of the room, shall we say, it becomes. We also have green ones and yellow ones, which I'll explain at another time, but they become important interpreting the very close together instances where the deadbolt's thrown and released. All right, so that explains the vast majority of markings that I do or use on a daily basis to interpret the lock interrogation report. Now you see, this is the detail work. It doesn't tell you what's really going on from a big picture or a human interaction point, and I'll do that with the graphics in the next video. But I take this information and I create other graphics, like with my storyboard, and I integrate the video, MGM videos, and I integrate the information from the FIT report and come up with a storyboard format. And I think that's the end of these. Oh no, okay. So here what I'm trying to do is show that there's a lot of context in this animated slide, shall we say, a lot of context to whatever's happening, and you can't just consider one portion like we are doing here with the these are the strange events or abnormal events. You have to consider what happened before and what happened after. Because in this case, you'll see with the large purple, that is an indication that there was a deadbolt closed, and it's that, to my interpretation, is he's protecting a particular room. In this case, we can see that the room being protected is room 134. As to why he's protecting one room or the other, that will be a separate analysis, because you really do have to look at the big picture and the big patterns over multiple hours and multiple days to come up with a coherent and rational explanation. And so this little slice of heaven, as I would call it, is just showing you that the context in which any event is interpreted matters substantially. All right. Now, if we take a closer look at the panic events, we see, and this is the complete, essentially the complete LIR. There's a few things that have been removed, like some of the online commands. But in this case, as I've already discussed, we see the single largest grouping of errors in the shortest period of time. They're against room 134 and against room 135, and they're done exclusively with this one group of cards, for which there's two cards in a group, and it's all against the card which was issued to room 134, and most of them are generated because this card issued to room 134 is being tried on room 135. I need to pause this for a moment. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So anyway, we have this very close-up look at the events, and a few things that I want to bring your attention to. And the first thing is that during this sequence of events in which the cards are being rejected, this single group of cards is being rejected against both room 134 and 135, we'll see that from 6:03 to 6:05 he did that 14 times, and then there's this 7-minute break. And that's the first indication that something different happened, and then after the 7-minute break, he comes up with a new card. Well, that suggests that he went and got a new group of cards, which I believe ultimately will be the prevailing theory. And to, kind of say, well, is that possible? What we do, let's go jump over to the live actual Excel spreadsheet. What we do is observe that way back when he did the check-in first time, something similar also happened. And let's see, Paddock would, here we go. Here on this row, we'll see that on the 29th at 3 p.m., the door was closed, And then 9 minutes later, we see the first occurrence of the first card being used against room 134. So that's 9 minutes. And you can easily interpret this as Paddock leaving the room, going down to somewhere, namely the VIP, and getting the card at there and coming back up and using it to gain entry to the room. So there we have a fairly well-known instance of a complete trip from his room down to the VIP, getting a card and back up, and all being done in 9 minutes. So when you come down here to this section, it's not out of the realm of possibility to easily say that, well, 7 minutes could have happened. And later, and in the next video, I'll go into a little bit greater detail of the timing of that. So here we have it. It's, you know, the theory at the moment holds water that it could have been done. We don't really have any indication like that the acquisition of the card group 4B occurred in a similar way. In fact, we know that he was from the FIT report coming back from Mandalay Bay, or excuse me, back from Mesquite, because of the time gap here and the other information that the FIT report presents. So there was no leave his room and go down and come back to look at. It's, you know, he left his room. He left his room at 12:52 and then went down the elevator probably and picked up his car and went to Mesquite and came back. But this is the first occurrence and use of card group 4B, and as with all other card accesses, the first occurrence generally falls close to the time at which the card group was issued. So it's pretty rational to assume in my book that the card group 4B was issued into Paddock's hands, you know, pretty close to 6 o'clock. Okay. Moving back over to our digital video interpretation. That's just, you know, the first thing you look at here to try to explain what's happening with Paddock at the time that he's doing all this. So if we let the video go forward a little bit more, we come into the gap, which I just said, and that's what I try to do in this visual scenario, is I circle that timing on there to show you that there is a gap. And then I also do what I just said. That's similar to to the time at which he checked into room 134, all done graphically in a few seconds. In this little segment, I'm going to be talking about the contribution of the MGM videos and other portions of the FIT report outside of the lock interrogation reports that contribute to the interpretation of the events on the morning of September 30th near 6 a.m. Recall that, you know, MGM released a bunch of videos, and LVSA channel kindly put them all together into one file, and so that's the basis of my video sources. And from that, I basically take a small section of them, those related to the September 30th. So here I've taken I've plopped the whole file into my video editor, and I've chopped it up into the various segments and given them labels, most of them labels anyway, so that I can see which pieces are relevant. And I'm going to find the ones on September 30th. It's this one right here, which, and the next, these four, there's four related. There's two at 6 a.m. and then two near 6:12, 6:13 that I'm going to be using to talk about the contribution of the MGM videos. Here I've just enlarged it to show you which ones. Now, kind of interesting is that the clocks on everything don't jive. So one camera will have a time, the next camera right next to it has a different time. The lock interrogation report a different time. The Valet system, which is a, let's see if I can remember, it's a a computerized valet parking system, CVPS. And it has to connect up with the rest of the Mandalay-based system, so it has its own concept of time. And we need to talk about time a little bit, and that's what I'm going to be doing extensively here with this sort of a graphic presentation, is to try to figure out when Paddock actually arrived on the morning of the 30th. Because when he arrived and when he left Valet with pulling his bags, will determine how much time he has to go from the Valet to VIP, up over to the elevators, up the elevator, down the hall into his rooms to meet the time frame where the log interrogation report says at 6:03 he swiped a card. So anyway, if we take the map, which you've already seen before, and we start laying out portions of the MGM videos that are relevant here, I'm flying in the two cameras we're going to be talking about. The first camera is recording the path that's the red line, and that one's mounted on the very edge of the portico, so it kind of gets the cars approaching down the driveway towards the portico. The green line is the camera that's located about midway under the portico, and it catches the valet people going to and from the cars, the guests coming out of the cars, that sort of stuff. And the blue line there is going to be used as a synchronization point, since obviously the cameras record overlapping paths. We can synchronize these two cameras so that if we need to do future work based upon the times of either one, at least there's a common point there. Now that doesn't tell us whether either one of them is accurate, and I'll have to talk a little bit more about something else before we can say anything about that. So anyway, I've got the paths here, and then what I'm going to do is show on the left hand side images from the red path, and then on the right hand side images from the green path. So let's just go ahead and let it roll. So here's the first image, and up in this we can see Paddock's car headlights rolling up to the camera, and this image is taken from the video at video time of 5:59 a.m. and 11.26 seconds. Now that's just what it says on the video. Doesn't mean that's the actual time. But given that we've been talking about the 6 a.m. time frame, it doesn't seem too far off. All right, so let it roll, and there'll be this image, which this image was taken at 5:59, 21.82 seconds. And this is where I'm going to synchronize up with the other green path. And the point of synchronization I chose was this little white area on the road where the car passes over, because that's visible in both videos. Now this looks like a black and white camera, but the camera itself is capable of color, because during the day it records color. I don't know whether they've turned it over to infrared or black and white only at night to get higher resolution, but it is capable of color. So if we let the next image roll, this is the last frame in the video, so now we can calculate the duration of the entire video, because this is the first frame up at the top and the last frame, and this last frame occurred at 5:59 and 24.35 seconds. Alright, so now I'm going to go over to the right hand side here and bring in images or frames from the green path camera, and this is underneath the portico where we see valet action. And of course the first frame up there is looking at pretty much an empty valet area, but way out there Paddock's car will be coming in, and we'll be able to see that in the next frame where I synchronize up the two. Now on this camera the time is currently 5:57 a.m. and 57.11 seconds, and we'll see how accurate that is. Alright, so the next frame comes in, and this is the synchronization frame at 5:58 a.m. and 5.18 seconds. And here, if you look very closely out there, you can see Paddock's car traversing over that little white spot in the road. And then, of course, the last frame from that video where Paddock, which occurs at least from video time, at 6 a.m., 34 seconds and 34.96 seconds, and that's where Paddock is going around the corner and leaving. So this would be, if we only had this video to go by, the time at which Paddock is officially exiting the Valet. Now, we notice from this graphic that these times don't match. When the vehicle crossed the white point, this little white point there, the times from each video are different. And in fact, the orange ones, which is the outside camera, is about, what, a minute and a half faster than the Valet. I call this one on the right the Valet, and the one on the left the approaching cam. So about a minute and a half difference. So if we wanted to do, we could go ahead and subtract a minute and a half from each of the orange ones to come up with more realistic, or at least synchronized, frames of time for the approaching cam. All right. So let's let it roll. And now we have to ask the question, if we have these two MGM videos, there's a total of 4. These are the first 2. They're in the 6 a.m. time frame. What does the other portions of the FIT report say about the arrival times and the luggage that he's bringing into the hotel? So if we go to a page in the FIT report, here we see that page, at page 31 of 187, and we see it says that at 5:56 hours Paddock returned to the Mandalay Bay with 4 suitcases. Okay, well, neither one of those images or videos records a time as early as 5:56. So either somebody either had a different source of information, or they took a time from probably the Valet one and then subtracted how much time it took to do things. Okay, but now let's look at this carefully. It says he returned with 4 suitcases, but in the video we know that he only is returning with 2 suitcases, and on top of one is a white paper shopping bag, don't know what's in it, and on top of the other one is he's returning, or he has a laptop. So really, if that's only 2 suitcases, and then later in the day he had moved his vehicle from the Valet area over to Self Park Garage, and then he brought in 2 more suitcases, rolling them himself. And they have, apparently they mentioned videos here, somebody saw him, and I suspect that somebody saw him in the videos. But up here we've got no mention. We've got no mention of him taking in bags. Well, let's just let this roll here a second, because I make notes on that. All right. So here I added, my observations about what isn't mentioned in this page from the FIT report about Paddock, his luggage, and his arrival times. So the things that aren't mentioned here is nothing about getting new access cards, nothing about the fact that he had trouble, just nothing. Okay. We also have no indication of what he was doing between the time at which he returned, 5:56, and the next thing we have him doing anything is talking to somebody about his, room being cleaned, in which he said, no, I don't want it cleaned. Well, where was Paddock? What was he doing? Why are they leaving this area in the FIT report blank? I don't know. Because down here we see that they've said that there's video showing Paddock taking 2 rolling suitcases up to his room, But yet up here they say 4, and they don't mention where the other 2 were. And that would leave you with the feeling, the implication, that he only brought 2 suitcases to the room and that he left 2 in the car. That is not the case. So I really wonder why they presented the information in this way. I doubt that it's strictly incompetence. This is one of those times when there's so much missing that you have to start asking serious questions about the intent of the FIT report for this day. Because even though the FIT report was released prior to the MGM videos, you know that they had to be looking at various videos to make the FIT report. I mean, after all, the sheriff said that they looked at thousands of hours, right? All right. It doesn't mention when he returned to his room. It just has him coming back to his room. Does it ever say? No. Doesn't ever say that he actually returned to his room ever, except that somehow he put the do not disturb sign on the doors after 12:15. Now we know from the witness statement of the guy who did the minibar there that he left around that time, and therefore they know that if there were do not disturb signs on there, then they had to be placed after that time, because when the minibar guy got there were not do not disturb signs. But I have no clue how they determined that it was sometime after or even on this day. They just don't give enough information. They don't tell you how Paddock was asked if he wanted his room clean, whether it was in person, over the phone, through messaging, somebody knocked on his door and he was in the room, all that sort of stuff. So this page is just horrible in terms of explaining what happened on the 30th. And as you can see, I'm incredulous when I say nobody saw him prior to 3:20 p.m. Give me a break, as Joe Biden would say. Come on, man. Give me a break. So there's just a lot of information that's not, presented right here. In fact, somewhere elsewhere in the FIT report, they have the testimony, or they summarize the testimony from one of the guys at the noodle shop placing Paddock there, and then there's another witness that places Paddock there, and the second witness, even though it may not be credible, says he was with a woman. So why would they not at least mention that he was at the noodle shop, since there are 2 witnesses who place him there on this day? And I don't know the exact time. I have to go review the witness statements. So where was Paddock? What was he doing? And as I've kind of mentioned, well, I'll get into this a little bit later. So that's what the FIT report says for the daily summary detailed timing of when he had. And we still don't know from any of this how they determined the 5:56. So what else? Other information? Well, there was some information that was leaked to the public from a Valet stand, and that's what we're going to take a look at now about the 6 a.m. Here's a picture of the leaked information, and it's a pretty good picture in pretty high resolution, and it shows what appears to be a terminal, a Valet terminal or cashier terminal, either one, with software running on it. And there's 3 windows up here. One is in the background, very background. That's a cashier's report from the CVPS system, the computerized valet parking system. And it has a lot of functionality. The second window is a parking report, and then the third window is a camera presentation. But they're here on the debt, and up here we have a summary of all the times in which Stephen Paddock parked his car when it was under his name. The Mary Lou Danley time is missing. But also down here we have a printed out ticket, which when we enlarge it and look at it, can be read. So this is a fascinating thing when you start looking at it, because in here you can also, when you blow this up, see who the cashier was logged into and a bunch of other information. So let's let this roll. All right. Here's that ticket that was in the lower left-hand corner enlarged. And here you can see that it records a time of 5:57 on the 30th. as well as a bunch of other information that's fascinating. So now we have a 5:57 time frame. Well, these tickets are entered by the CVPS system after the time that they're stamped is when the information collection by the valet attendant is complete and he submits it to the system. So the valet has to, walk up to the customer with the car and collect up various informations, make, model, car, room if they know it already, maybe the VIN and who the person is and how they're going to pay and all that sort of stuff, and put that into his probably a tablet and then hit submit, and then it generates a ticket with a date on it. And this probably is a post-shooting printed ticket. I doubt that somebody had this ticket and kept it prior to the shooting, but just printed up another one, and this ticket number jives with all the other information that we see from the leaked image. So 5:57. That's what the computerized valet system thinks, and this is just somebody's interpretation of what is on that ticket. It looks pretty accurate. In fact, I got this from information given to me by LVSA. All right, another piece of information that we see is that area above the image of a car, and I believe, this image of the car was from an earlier visit to the hotels from the Delano parking self-park area. Or is that, I don't know, it's from the Delano parking area. Let's just put it that way. All right, and here's that information blown up. As you can see, it's pretty clear, and we can see that the arrival time is again 5:57 here on the 30th. So, and there we have the textual interpretation of all the information there. Kind of interesting to note that even though he arrived at 5:57, they didn't get around to parking his car till 10:35, which I find fascinating. So that means they had to stage it somewhere there in the valet area. It's a long time to stage cars. Okay, so here we have two videos. We have the FIT report saying 5:56. We have the valet system saying 5:57. The valet video itself. Let me see. I think I have up a detailed. Where was it? Here we go, over here. I took and watched the video in detail and noted the times at which the valet attendant talked to Paddock. And he started talking at 5:58 a.m. at 50.21 seconds. And that's when he started, he had walked over to Paddock's car. Paddock got out of the car and they started talking. I'm sure that's when the valet was collecting information. And then they stopped talking at 5:57. Excuse me. They did not stop talking at 5:57. The frame at which the Paddock and the valet attendant stopped talking has a time stamp on it of 5:59 and 19.14 seconds. Okay, but the entry on the valet is 5:57. Now that's plus or minus a minute, but if you take it at face value, that's a difference between the valet video, the green path thing, and the valet time of 2 minutes and 19 seconds. It's a pretty big difference. So what that would mean is that you would have to take and subtract approximately 2 minutes, let's say, maybe a minute and a half, maybe a minute and 45, from all the times at which you want to extract from the video of the valet. So, for example, the very last clip that we see of Paddock rolling around the thing, it occurs at 6 a.m. and 34.94 seconds. Let's just call it 35 seconds. So 6 a.m. and 35 seconds. And if we were to subtract, let's say a minute and a half, because that's within, the margin of error for this 1 minute resolution, then we would find, if we subtract 1.5 minutes from this time frame at which Paddock was leaving the Valet area, then we'd say that he left at 5:59. Okay, and since the lock interrogation report says 6:03, that would give him about a little over 4 minutes, right? Okay. So 4 minutes to walk over to VIP, get a card, walk over the elevators, go up the elevator and down the hall. Entirely feasible. But that's a lot better than 3 minutes based upon this time here. If this time were real, he would have 2.5 minutes to accomplish that feat, which really is not very viable. So this timing and this information from this leaked image coupled with the video itself is crucial to the timing of the whole thing. And here I went ahead and subtracted the whole 2 minutes and 19 from it, which is, kind of a very optimistic estimate, and it would come up with Paddock leaving the Valet area at 5:58 a.m. and 15.8 seconds, which, as you can see, would give him another, close to a minute. All right, where does that put us? That puts us, let me make sure that I covered everything here that I want to. Yeah, it just goes into that. So for this little segment, we have, so we have to answer the question again, why did the LVMPD think that Paddock arrived at 5:56? Well, if we were to, let's go back over to the Excel spreadsheet there with the times. How long did Paddock and the Valet attendant talk? Let's see here. He started talking at 58:50 and ended at 59:19. So let's just call that 30 seconds. So if you take the ticket time of 5:57 and you subtract 30, then you're at 5:56 and 30. And that may very well be why LVMPD put down 5:56. So I think that's, kind of the mystery solved. I don't really know. That's how they calculated it. But it is a reasonable time based upon reviewing the video and integrating in the leaked information. And so that pretty much sets in stone the timing, and I'll leave it as an exercise to you guys to subtract all the numbers. I'll do it at a later time. And so MGM videos plus the fit report, daily timing plus the leaked images, all merge together to provide a fairly concrete timing of both Paddock's arrival and his time at which he left the Valet area. It also records, when he spoke with the Valet, when he unloaded his luggage, and all that sort of stuff. All right. So that's the contribution that these pieces of information have made to this little saga that we call the panic attack. All right. Having looked at the 2 MGM videos for the Valet entrance near 6 a.m., we now focus on the 2 videos that we have near the 6:12, 6:13 time. And one of them shows Paddock pulling bags towards the core elevators from the VIP area, and the other shows him riding up the elevators. So in the same way that we did the videos, let's lay them out graphically. So here we go. We see the cameras. There are 2 cameras. One is located in the elevator, as indicated by this camera location near the green circle. These are the core elevators, and this is the elevator that he took. And the other elevator is located directly across from the entrance to the bank for the 32nd floor. In this, we see that we have two paths. One is the elevator, which is the green area, which goes straight up and down, and the other is a path from the elevator to the VIP room. The blue line indicates, in this case, where we will synchronize things, but actually in this little graphic, the times are not synced, but they're directly taken from the videos themselves. So let's take a look at the still images that I've acquired here. The first one is the first frame of this video, where up in the upper right hand corner, Paddock will be coming into view in the next few frames, which I don't show, but this is just the first frame, because in this slide presentation I want the first frame so that I can do some calculations on the duration of the frame of the video, etc. So that's at 6:12:56.12. Now that's as reported by the video. The next one is just a random frame taken so that where you can see Paddock here wearing his blue shirt, dark pants. There's a white bag there on top of a bag, and over here is that's the reddish bag, even though the color here is poor. And then here's the blue bag with the laptop on it, and that was at 6:13 for 14 seconds and 94. And then the third one, of course, is the last frame, where you can see Paddock way down there either pushing the button or getting into the elevator, and that occurred at 6:13:23:03. Now for the second video, which is the one going up the elevator, we've done the same thing. And so here's the first frame at 6:12:05 and 16. Here's the second frame at well, you can read the times for yourself. And finally, the last frame. So here we have it. Now what we're going to do in the next one is synchronize the last frame of this video with the first frame of the elevator. And that way, well, we can see that the elevator clock is, or timestamp is, earlier than the core walkthrough, which makes absolutely no sense, because you can't, walk through the core elevator to get to the elevator after you've already been there in time. So what we do now is synchronize the two, and like I said, the last frame of the core walk to the first frame of the video, and the time difference there is 1 minute 17.87 seconds. So now I'll do the same graphic, this time with all the time synced to the elevator. All right, here we go. We have it. And when we do that, the elevator times remain the same, but the core walkthrough now has that minute and 17 seconds subtracted from it. And as you can see, then the first frame of this video would be occurring now at 6 a.m. 11 minutes 38.25 seconds, and similarly all along here. And I call this the elevator sync, and I've drawn the big blue line between these two frames, two videos, to indicate which frames were used to synchronize. Now since the lock interrogation report says that the first use of card 135 against room 135 occurred at 6:12, we have a problem here, because obviously you can't be exiting the elevator at 6:13 and swiping the card at 6:12. So in the next little graphic, I'll adjust for the difference in time between this clock and the LIR, and we'll favor the LIR, so we have to adjust both. We have to adjust all of these accordingly. And so we'll go ahead and do that and calculate that let's see, what is it here? The difference in time would be 2 minutes and approximately 6 seconds. And if we adjust the clocks accordingly, then this is what we get. We get Paddock coming out of the VIP near 6:09 and 32, and we get him stepping out of the elevator at 6 a.m. 10 minutes and 50 seconds, which gives him precisely 70 seconds to get down there. Now, that is my best estimate of when things happened and how these videos have been used by myself to augment the interpretation of the lock interrogation report. All right. So far we've covered a lot of stuff in this video, but basically we've gone through looking at the lock interrogation report annotated, and we've looked at the events around 6 o'clock on the 30th. And then after doing quite a bit of that, you were introduced to the videos from MGM, the 4 videos, 2 for the 6 a.m. time frame, 2 for the 6:12 time frame. But, you know, it doesn't quite bring this story together. And the next phase in the whole analysis process is to bring them into something which gives you a real visual, glaring, upfront, in-your-face overview of the whole process, a way to tie it all together, and a place to deposit graphic information that summarizes the whole process. And I call that the storyboard. Now, this background I have up here is something that a video that I'm working on right now in addition to this stuff, and it just shows the value of having something that's visual and in your face. This happens to be just part of the process I'm working on to analyze one of the recent videos that LVSA put up. But anyway, so, and that's for gunshot acoustics. But you have to have the same thing for the lock interrogation report, because sometimes words don't cut it, sometimes videos don't cut it, sometimes they all need to be integrated together into a way that is really visual in nature, that you can see what's going on, that you don't have to have a lot of verbiage to describe it. Even though typically I will, take the time to do the verbiage. So let's go ahead and look at the lock interrogation report. Excuse me, the storyboard. So before I get started on the storyboard, I just want to remind you of the color coding scheme that I'll be using in this document. For those who may not be familiar or recall that I've color coded it in such a way that things stand out and pop out in your face. For example, if you see this bright purple, a square that's bright purple colored, then that's something to do with the self-park garage. If you see one that's blue, that means it's probably a core elevator trip. If you see something that's bright yellow, that's a service elevator trip. And if you see something that's dark green, that means that it was an arrival at the valet, and if it's a light green, that was a departure from the valet. And then we could go into the other more muted colors, which are associated with the rooms for brownish, orangish, and the casino level, which is kind of orangish, yellowish, and then sometimes, the other trips were kind of grayish. All right, so with that in place, let's jump to the 30th. Let's see if I can get this correct in the first, this must be the 30th right there. All right. One of the few times that I get it correct. So here's the 30th. Now shrink it down so we can see the whole day. So you see, this is the storyboard. I've taken all the lock interrogation report information. I've taken the MGM videos. I've taken the FIT information. I've taken witness testimony. And I've tried to distill it into something that I can look at least, and hopefully others can look at and get a good feeling for what's going on. And so here you see on the 30th, immediately, Saturday, that we have at the very start of the day a trip to Mesquite with all the events that took place in that. And then you see the next thing, which is what we're looking at, is the panic attack. I'm locked out of my rooms. It shows, and I've summarized it in a couple of words there: get new cards and hauling 2 rollies. And then you'll see other activity or chunks. These are associated with the chunks in the lock interrogation report, each one of which is warranting a whole video in and of itself. So anyway, then you see some other stuff down here, and then the second trip in Mesquite. And you'll notice the things that stand out are the blue, which are uh, core elevator trips, and as you can see, there's a lot of them needed. Okay, what you won't see is any yellow, bright yellow, so there are no service elevator trips. Okay, purples, those are self-parking things, including the elevators and walking around. And then you have the greens. We have this, which is the dark green, which, as you'll recall, was a valet arrival, and then the bright green, which is a valet departure. And I put them in different colors because they're on different levels of the portico. The arrivals occur on the top level and the departures occur on the lower level. And then the rest of the stuff is either, the grayish type stuff, which is mesquite, or the brownish orangish stuff, which is rooms. Let's see, I don't have on this sheet any real yellowish orange for casino activity. And then, of course, we have the pinkish stuff, which pinkish tends to mean that it's kind of an unknown. I mean, sure, we may know that he's driving, but I don't have all the details in there. All right, so with that in mind, let's zoom in on the panic attack, which is what we're interested in, and start looking at the events. Remember, we have the FIT report, and in this video anyway, we've discussed the FIT report. It's FIT report, Jiminy Christmas, I'm losing my mind this time of night. The lock interrogation report, and we've also looked at the MGM. So if we zoom in on this, then we see here, we start out, just as we already know, in the 6 a.m. time frame. We have Paddock's vehicle arriving here, and if I wanted to, in this case, since this is all live stuff, not just a video, I could zoom in as much as I want to and even start up the video. But anyway, we'll have two things, both of them occurring at Valet. One is the arrival of his car, and the other is Paddock inside the valet area unloading the stuff. Now, this is not a very good image, and I apologize for that, but it is a work in progress. It is a storyboard. I don't have any post-processing enhancements to apply here, so I have to make do with what it is. All right, so anyway, we see here now in a very graphic way that he both arrived and unpacked his stuff at the valet around the 6 a.m. time frame. Now, these are unadjusted times. These aren't adjusted or aligned or anything. These are just the times as reported in the videos. So keep in mind that they're not entirely accurate. Okay, and then we have this event here, which is the acquisition of new cards, specifically for room 134, or the 4B group, which is will become the first occurrence of the 4B card later on. And then once he left Valet and acquired the card, he had to go up the elevator to get to his rooms. And then once he got up to his elevator, he did one of two things, and they're both at the same time, 6:03. And they are used the card against room 135 and 134. For room 135, the access was denied 12 times because, as we already know, the card was issued to room 134. You can't very well get into room 135 with a room 134 card. And then, of course, he did also try that 134 card on the proper room, namely 134, but it was denied because the door was deadbolted. He'd left the door in a deadbolted state. Okay, so once he got all frustrated and flustered and everything, and he had to make a trip back down to get new cards, he had to take an elevator trip. And of course, this shows that we have no timing being reported by the FIT report or anything for that elevator trip, nor do we have any videos from MGM. And then once he was down there and he went to the VIP, he acquired a new set of cards, 2 cards to be precise, both for room 135, and that would be the 5B card set, which would be the final set of cards that were issued to Paddock, bringing the total to 8. All right. And then once he has those cards, he hops back over to, well, actually in this case we see that around 6:13, and that's the time as reported by the video. It's not correct. It's off by at least 3 minutes. We see that Paddock is strolling over from VIP area through this up to the center core elevators, and then eventually he will get into here at this elevator. And then once he does, we have the MGM video of him taking the elevator up and exiting on the 32nd floor, which he'll then walk down the hallway and come over and use his new cards, his second time for new cards at 612, according to the LIR, and he will have access granted to room 135. So this is a very visual interpretation of all the events in the 6 to 6, 13 time frame. And this is a storyboard, and there's a lot of information in this storyboard, and it helps keep me straight every time I need questions, because going to the log interrogation report is really very, very detailed. And you need sometimes to see the forest for the trees, and that's what this storyboard does. Now, not every bit of information here, well, this is a work in progress, and so lots of things will be added and changed as time develops and is refined. And some information is more refined than others. But we can use this type of presentation to our advantage in that we don't have to go running through a lot of documents. We can look right here, because we can see afterwards we have this little section called testing doors at 6:13, and then he exited at 6:13. And of course then we have this segment, a big segment of unknown time, and then somewhere down the ways he'll be spotted at the noodle shop, and then after that we don't know. And then ultimately the lock interrogation report over here, he will come back up at 2:05, and he will use his 4B card to enter room 134, and then there'll be 38 minutes for which I don't know yet what he's doing. So here we can see both the events before and after, and get a better concept of what or why these events may have taken place. So for example, if we ask, why does he need new cards? Why does he need new cards? And it has to be something that happened or something that he planned that led up to those events. And here we can start to get a little bit of an idea. I mean, as I probably already said, here he took a trip to Mesquite. This is normally his gambling time. And how do I know that? Well, let's hop over to another little graphic. Let's see. And that graphic is this. And this is an Excel spreadsheet where I tried to summarize every hour of every day from the 17th forward. And when I did that, and I laid out what he was doing, what we knew he was doing, and sometimes guessing what he was doing, it comes up with some really interesting observations. I mean, one of the observations is that the least amount of activity that is reported anywhere occurs between the hours of 7 and 12. Well, Paddock is a known person who likes to stay up late, gamble all night, and then come to bed early morning and sleep. And that shows this dramatically in a way that just stands out in your face, because there's no activity here. There's no activity in those time frames except on a couple days. So where was he? What he was doing? He was probably sleeping. So on the 30th, here on the Saturday on the 30th, he's not, that we know of, although we don't really know what he's doing. We have to say that, well, he usually sleeps during this time. So did he go somewhere else to sleep, and if so, where? And if he's not going somewhere else to sleep, what did he go do? But regardless, it's unusual behavior that he didn't sleep in his room or sleep at his home in Mesquite. So it's a big mystery question, and it raises lots of red flags. You'll also notice that these time frames prior to the 7 a.m. is when he likes to gamble. Now, not every day is gambling, but when he gets the opportunity to, he does, but not on the 30th. On the 30th, he took a trip to Mesquite. Why did he take a trip to Mesquite? He didn't do anything on the 29th. He could have done it you know, as he would, if he had stayed true to his habit, he would have taken a trip late on the 29th to Mesquite, you know, and then come back and gambled. But he didn't. So you have to ask yourself why. You know? So here on this little chart, the other thing we notice here is I've marked it with the green square, which is a shift change. These are the hours that your 2 to 10 shift would occupy. You'll notice that when he comes in here and does the bellhop stuff on the, well, let's zoom in a little ways so we can see that. Just remember the green is the shift change. Okay, here we find a bellhop on the 25th, which would be between the hours of 2 and 10. But the next time he uses the bellhop, it's just over the hour. It's just into the shift change. And then again, on Thursday, he'd use the same hours, but since it's a Thursday, it's most likely a different person. And so we see this type of planning, what appears anyway to be planning ahead of time. So what happened on the 30th? When did he arrive? Well, he arrived in the early mornings, and as we know from our investigations prior, he arrived before 6, which is right on the edge of when a shift change would occur. And he got a set of cards just before the shift, and he got a set of cards just after the shift. Now, is that coincidence or is that planning? And those are the types of things that we'll be discussing in later videos to come up with a picture of what may have been in his mind and why he planned it. So these are behavioral summaries that have to be looked at to get the full picture of what the lock interrogation report means. Another piece of that picture is to look at the baggage. Let's see. If we go back over to the storyboard, I have in the same file a sort of a diagram of when things happened in terms of luggage. And it's, still in its infancy, but it's far enough along that I can show you something here. And I'll mention this again in the next video because it's relevant. Here we see that I have to kind of shrink it down enough to get it over there onto the screen. There we go. Here we'll see that by the indication of these red bellhop commands, these are the days in which he used the bellhop to take luggage up. And so we see that there were 1, 2, 3 bellhops, and each time he took lots of luggage. And the first 2 trips he also rolled up something with him. So these are the days in which he brought up the big pieces of luggage. And I'll show you pictures in another video that shows you the size of these luggages, comparatively speaking, versus, say, the size of the luggages which occurred later, which are smaller. And then here on the 29th, of course, there's nothing. So every bellhop was used prior to the 28th and inclusive. So on the 25th, the 26th, and the 28th, he used the bellhop. And then on the last 2 days, he himself carried up 6 additional bags, all rolling and all of a smaller size. And once again, this will be rolled into part of what the planning on Paddock's part was. Why bring up the big suitcases early and the small cases later? Coincidence or planning? You tell me, or I'll tell you in a later video. So all these things rolled in together can be used to help interpret what happened on the 30th and what happened elsewhere in the lock interrogation report. For example, well, let's just leave it at that. There's a lot of fascinating stories to tell, and we don't need to cover everything in one night. All right. So let's roll back over to, or back up to the storyboard on the 30th. Let's see, yeah, there we go. And just leave the storyboard thing with saying that I take great pains to make things both verbal and visual, because I realize that there are both types of people in the world. I think I'm doing great on the visual aspect. Maybe I can improve the verbal. But anyway, what happens when we're done with this? We've got the lock interrogation report that you've looked at. You've got the MGM videos that we rolled through, including the timing of them. You've looked at the storyboard. What's the next phase in this? Well, the next phase is to lay down my notes in preparation for making graphic presentations or making these videos, and that will occur in Obsidian, which is it's a tool that I use all the time that basically is I don't know how to put this. Well, it's just a way of keeping track of information that I can use, references, back and forth, links, virtual links that aren't dependent upon a file system, and which you can change one and it's changed everywhere in there, and you can search them and organize them easily and all that sort of stuff. And so you end up with, let's see, here we go. Here's where we're at for the panic attack. And here, I basically have used tables inside of Obsidian to show me all the events, and then these are my annotations, and we've gone over this a little bit, so that I have everything right here in front of me in this note stuff, to which I can just follow this through and lay out a story. Now that doesn't create the video for me, but it helps do it. And from this I can also compare this to both the storyboard, the lock interrogation report, and the other information that we have from, like maybe the luggage storyboard, or the event storyboard, or the daily summary of events and all that. And so this is sort of a parallel data store that gets developed as I create each of the other pieces. And there's a little bit of duplication, but this contains more detail in preparation for a verbal presentation. All right, so that pretty much brings us to the conclusion, or at least as far as I want to take it this evening, of video 4, which we've gone through and we've presented the context in which these events took place, the timing of them. I've made a lot of graphic presentations of them, explained to you how all the information rolls together. And now we're ready to put the whole story together. And that's coming in the next video, the grandiose summary of this saga of information that we can now interpret what happened between 6 and 6:13 on Saturday the 30th, and why Paddock needed to acquire more cards.